This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. Brought to you by the Fort Hall School of Government, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you might have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 6th of October 2020, and I am 2J.
I'm JM.
And I am GK. In case you missed the headlines, here they are. In the Daily Nation, how politicians plotted chaos. In the Standard, the hustler fixing RUTO. And in the Star, Uhuru allies plot to kick out RUTO as DP. Now let us begin with the Daily Nation, where we all saw the events of Sunday in Murang'a, where the Daily Nation chronicles what exactly happened. And they said that since the war for the Jubilee Party began, Murang'a has emerged as a hotspot of mayhem. That's a new affiliation there. And so leaders between Tangatanga and Kieleweke sort of camps ferried youth to Kennel on Sunday. And, you know, there was this big blow up in which 2 people died. Now, the Daily Nation tells us that according to intelligence and police sources, each of the rival groups sponsored young youth from different areas, not even from Murang'a, to come and have this standoff. So apparently the ones from Tangatanga had them come from Nairobi, from estates in Githurai, Kasarani, Kayole, Kibera, and the ones from Kieleweke came from Kiandutu and Thika and places like that. Now I have 2 things to say, or 3. Firstly, churches and religious sanctuaries need to remain neutral in this whole thing. They need to remain holy and sacred as places of sanctuary. They should not be used as easily, I think, as they've been manipulated in the last few months. And then, interestingly, the power of identity here. There's a huge narrative between the Kalenjin and the Kikuyu, and this thing is causing a lot of hostility, negativity, and is not a good buffer for any sort of electoral violence. It's making things worse.
Yes.
And there's a slippery slope here. I mean, we saw how easy it was in 2007 and we said never again. So should we allow this to continue, 2 years to the next election? It is way too early in my opinion.
Far too early, yeah.
And also the hustler narrative seems to be creating this in-group, right? And anyone perceived as the outside is being chastised or devalued, and vice versa. Both groups are doing it to each other. So we need to put an end to this. Both sides were not right in this case.
Not at all. And if anything, that's what I appreciate, about the Daily Nation headline.
Yeah, but just before you go there, I also have a few comments to make on this one. As we said in our Damaging Ignorance episode of Sunday, if Kikuyus want to be misled by William Ruto, they should be it's fine. It's okay, because at the end of the day, all Uhuru Kenyatta will need is the Wakurino women or the Akurino population, 1.2 million voters, and that gets Raila Odinga over the finish line with 44%. So what I'm really saying is, the Ruto should not be obstructed from going into central Kenya. In fact, he should continue to be misled himself into believing that the people of the mountain are with him.
Want him,
Yes.
I mean, what I was saying is I appreciate the neutrality of the headline of some sorts. That there's an acceptance on both sides that each of them crossed a line that they should have not. And I think that kind of explains why very few people have come out to condemn or to question what happened. I think it's because each party is waiting for the other to say something, knowing that each party was also had a hand in it. So until we see that kind of acceptance, we're headed down a very dangerous and scary road.
Yes. So we will have a 3-part criteria that we will use to break down the headlines. We'll ask ourselves: is it topical or speculative? Is it repetitive or groundbreaking? And is it thoughtful or just plain lazy? I think this is topical. It is not repetitive, but it is thoughtful. In terms of saying that both perpetrators and defenders of violence have some blame in this incident on Sunday. So let's move to the Standard. We'll park that. The hustler. Who is the hustler? Who is fixing RUTO?
This is Nelson Zuya, the Jubilee Party chairman. Very little is known of him, and he is apparently the man executing the scheme to dismantle William Ruto within the Jubilee Party. He was once an ally of the deputy president, but he's now gatekeeping on the side of the party leader. Before Jubilee was birthed, Zuya was an operative at the now defunct URP party, where he blew Ruto's horn, we're told, He was formerly a tout in Mombasa, plying the Likoni Ferry Magongo route. And then he joined the leadership of Jubilee of JAP before taking over as chairman of the party now. They've got a very interesting description of him. And the Standard says, and I quote, "He's effectively the small axe bringing down the big trees in the president's party. Through his silent chops, disbelieving former majority leaders Aden Duale and Kipchumba Murkomen fell." So this is the Nelson Zuya.
But they also outlined that he was, I don't know if you mentioned this, that he was a matatu tout. Yes. That he did actually come from very humble beginnings.
Yes, he was a hustler.
Yeah, he was and that's what I was wondering. If we're saying that he's this fairly unknown chairman and whatnot who's behind this scheme, it just more so looks to me like they're using a real hustler, this guy Nelson, in order to fight a fake hustler. RUTO, right?
I like that.
That's a good one. Yeah.
So if anything, I want Nelson to tell us what he really has against the DP. I think that if a real hustler can tell us why we should not look at the DP as a hustler, he's the person to tell us.
And we will believe him.
And we will
because
believe
he was
him.
Part of the DP's party, URP.
Exactly.
Okay, so let's park that. Move to the Star. Uhuru allies plot to kick out RUTO as DP. So
the Star is outlining this scheme that Nelson is supposedly coming up with, and they say the first step would be to remove him from the Jubilee party membership. However, that does not then make his position as deputy president null and void. The second step would then be to impeach him, and they go on to discuss who would have the numbers for impeachment, what it requires for an impeachment. But I think more importantly, what the Star outlines is some of the narratives that were drowned out between Sunday and I guess today. In that the central Kenyan leaders came out saying that they will not allow the politics of incitement in their own backyard. And more importantly, that the Kikuyu Council of Elders declared that RUTO does not deserve the region's votes because he betrayed the president. So all of these conversations were being had, but somehow they didn't, I don't think they reached everyone. I think the person at the forefront of condemnation of Sunday's events was Raila Odinga. So I think we need more Gema leaders to come out and say what they felt about this incident. I think that's important.
Interesting.
But
so it seems to me, and I'll be devil's advocate here, that somebody is using impeachment as a remedy of private wrongs and grudges. Because as we speak, no one has really articulated or formalized why the DP should be impeached. And I think that should be the first step.
I agree.
He can lose the party, but when it comes to removing him as deputy president, I think a stronger case there needs to be made.
Definitely.
Who should we give our winning headline, guys?
I would go with the Daily Nation.
Daily Nation.
Daily Nation.
I think the headline and the imagery of the people who were lost on Sunday.
Politicians behaving badly.
Okay, so there you have it. Daily Nation gives us our winning headline. On to the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country, where we also have a 3-part criteria. We ask ourselves, is it humorous or dry? Is it satirical or pessimistic? And is it effective or just plain lazy? Can we begin with the Standard, please?
Standard. We've been taking it to Tanzania. So we have a cartoon of opposition candidate Tundu Lissu, depicted as a muscled cat. On his foot trail is an assortment of about 7 weapons aimed at him, but which have not quite hit him. So there's an axe, a bomb, a knife, a rock, all suggesting that Lissu is like a cat with 9 lives.
Surviving.
He's the person going up against Magufuli in the upcoming election. And the caption reads, "With apology to Pat Oliphant, who's an Australian-born American cartoonist known for caricatures of American presidents."
Gado is really trying to ensure that he can never return back to his home country, right? I feel like he attacked Magufuli, Tanzania at any chance that he gets to do so.
I don't know. I wasn't.
It's not really relevant to us, so can we just toss that?
So in the Daily Nation, we have a very larger-than-life hand, and the sleeve there says politicians, and he's holding a big revolver or a gun. And in the chambers, you can see caricatures of, I think that's Alice Wahome and maybe Dindinyora, I'm not sure who that is. And the caption there is dispensable youth. Interesting. I keep wondering whether the youth are as passive as we think that they are when it comes to being used in politics. But I'll leave that up for debate.
But I think they are. If you're saying that 1,000 shillings, 500 shillings can convince you, is all that it's used to change your mind. Maybe they are as passive as we think they are, which is unfortunate.
Is that
right?
not politics of the belly though? If you're going to give me that and I didn't have it, I will take that money.
Which I think is part of the irony of the hustler narrative that RUTO is pushing. He's saying that the youth is going to be my agenda. I want to empower the youth. And what does he do? He sucks the life out of the youth for his own purpose. So That's not fair.
Let's park it. Let's see what's in the star. We have two caricature hands. One is the hustler, one is dynasty. And below them, they have puppets, which are the youth. And the youth are holding stones and clobbering each other. And the caption there is the most misused words currently.
Hustler and dynasty.
Yeah, again, there to say that, the youth are sort of being used for each political end.
I want to ask two questions. The first one is, can a hustler somewhere please articulate to me what the hustlers want? And I say this in regard to the final thought of yesterday, where we looked at the Occupy Wall Street movement, where one thing that they failed to do was to tell the powers that be what they actually wanted to come of this movement that they were pushing. And I think if the hustlers tell us what they want, then I think there may be a better way to handle it than them being used or people dying or, incitement. I think RUTO has done a very good job of being a man of words, if we may call him that, kind of trying to articulate what he thinks the hustlers want. But I don't think he knows what they want. I actually want to call him a Pied Piper. The story of the Pied Piper comes from, I think it's the Middle Ages in Germany. And the Pied Piper was a man who was dressed like a clown, and he was actually a rat catcher. And he was hired by the town to alleviate them of the curse of, they had these immense amount of rats. So he would use his flute and he would call the rats away. And so the townspeople then decided to not pay him. So he then came back and he used his flute to then take away their children in the same way that he had taken away the rats. And so I just see RUTO, instead of a flute, I guess he has a wheelbarrow. And he's ferrying away the youth, to a place that they do not understand, for his own purposes. So
I like that. On that note, can we give Ozone our winning cartoon?
Yes.
And your commentary as well, TJ.
Oh, wow, that's the first.
There you have it. And now for our final thought, but before we get there, please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
And now for our final thought. Today is inspired by a book entitled Can the Internet Strengthen Democracy? Written by Stephen Coleman. And so I think just first to look at the internet. From its inception as this public communication network, it's been regarded by many as having the potential to allow people to escape from the stranglehold of top-down, stage-managed politics. Because if hundreds of thousands or millions of people can be the producers as well as the receivers of political messages, in some form, the author argues that this can actually strengthen democracy. So I think in the past decade, we've seen a concern rising about how social media can undermine democracy. And not very long ago, if we take the Arab Spring, for example, social media was hailed as this liberation technology that could help spread democracy. It started in one country, and the use of social media kind of had this domino effect of telling people, using this platform can help you air your grievances. But how can that be? And I think to answer that, we have to look at two crucial observations. The first is that social media is a tool to give voice to those who have previously been excluded from access to mainstream media. But the second is that despite the fact that social media gives you this immense access to information, those using it can also at the same time censor and manipulate that very same information to silence those people. And some of those censorship forms we see are like hindering access to information or threatening opposition. And these are like centuries old tactics. These are not new. But then some of the new forms that we've seen are employing bots or trolls to change the conversation online. And these are very particular to the digital age. And so when we take these two observations together, you begin to see this very complex relationship between social media and democracy. Who's in the right, who's in the wrong, who's responsible for monitoring and managing these kinds of interactions. And so the big issue that Coleman then highlights is that governments around the world, unfortunately, in both established and growing democracies, have missed a huge opportunity to reinvent themselves and restore legitimacy and connect with their citizens through the internet. I think if you look at the majority of the youth today, the internet is where they are. You have to meet people, at their lowest common denominator. And he says in the book, democratic governments find themselves confused and embarrassed by the ubiquity of the internet, the massiveness of the internet. There's a fundamental mismatch between its logic, the government's logic, and the people's logic. And so we're having this situation where forms of communication with government that dominated the pre-internet era, we're talking about parties, broadcast media, newspapers, are completely in decline. So how do you reach your citizens and how do you have communication with them that resonates, that's important? And so many believe that the internet will fundamentally transform political democracy. It's going to replace all of these old forms of representation and create new ones. He talks about techno-populism, which is an anti-system or anti-establishment rhetoric that happens through digital means. And so he identifies 6 communicative tasks in the book that democratic citizens must be able to accomplish and that the internet might help to facilitate. He talks about people sharing their experiences, gathering reliable information, deliberating together, taking collective action, experiencing institutional responsiveness, and scrutinizing the powerful. But I think that as much as that sounds very nice and flowery, I don't know how possible that is. I think one thing the internet has also taught us is that maybe we have gone back to square one. A lot of people do have distrust in the internet, and I think GK will cover a lot of how that begins to happen, how that manifests itself. And I think Kenya has become quite a good example of how rhetoric moves from the traditional mainstream into the internet and just leaves people confused, if not more confused than before.
So I want to flip it just a little bit and talk about how the internet is killing democracy. And the author here says, information overload on social media connectivity encourages tribalism, divisiveness, and demagoguery. And so in politics, as in life in general, we human beings have a natural tendency to congregate into groups of like-minded individuals. Now, what turns a group into a political tribe is a shared sense of struggle or grievance. And there have always been such tribes historically. And what technology does is to significantly facilitate the opportunity for these like-minded people to bond, to strengthen those linkages, and to strengthen that identity. And so by making it easier for people to find and create associations with each other on the internet, the net enables them to cluster into smaller groups with more specific grievances, fragmenting the population into more and more tribes. And as a result, no matter your background or concern, you're likely to find your specific tribe online. So it's a good thing in one sense because you find the people you like, but then on the other hand, you become more and more entrenched and polarized in your beliefs. And so after facilitating the creation of the tribes, technology then reinforces them by encouraging their members to consume a diet of information that fans the flames of their shared sense of view of the world, of injustice, if that's the case. And this boils down to the sheer amount of content available online, which allows them once again to find like-minded people and sources of information to feed their view of the world. And then on top of that, you've got the algorithmic curation. And those are the algorithms which we are not very aware of on the front end, but they're always running on the back end of the softwares that we're using, which amplifies people's views and continues to push them towards a very narrow minded sort of perspective. It's tunneling, cognitive tunneling of the world. And as a result, people become increasingly agitated and entrenched in their beliefs. They become more fixated in what they believe, less likely to deviate. And that makes it more difficult to cooperate, to compromise in times of political deadlock. And then it really just entrenches that tribal division. And then people begin to band together and you get more fragmented politics. I'll just give an example of the Trump supporters in 2016 and how they were able to flock to him because they saw him as a leader who would save them from the enemy tribes, who are the Mexicans, the Muslims, the liberals, the mainstream media, people like CNN and co. So the internet gave them an opportunity to, come out, band together online, and then they translated that on voting day and through the electoral colleges, and that's how it works.
Wow. When you kept talking about political tribes, I kept thinking about the Hustler Nation. That's a group that has a real narrative online. However, so if the internet is going to be this sort of platform for emergent sort of self-expression, that everybody can have a voice, the author, Coleman, asks us, how can we be better actors, reflective actors, more conscious, more reflective, more informed, so that we're not being taken advantage of? And we've seen the likes of Cambridge Analytica and what they did with Brexit, or the Russians with the American election. There's a lot of manipulation that happens online. But before I get there, there's a quote by Winston Churchill who said that the best argument against democracy is a 5-minute conversation with the average voter. So now you have the internet. Absolutely. You're not the average voter. You're a little bit smarter.
That is one of my favorite quotes.
Okay, yes. But now we have the internet. We're a little bit smarter. We can connect things. And one of the chapters he talks about honing these capabilities, being able to make sense of the political world. And the case study he uses is of Brexit in the UK. So when the UK was doing their referendum and the British people were to vote on whether they should stay in the European Union or leave. And a consensus, it was said, seemed to be that it was a bad-tempered debate in which excessive and judicious claims left many voters feeling bewildered, confused, and lacking any empirical foundation. And so what would happen is, because the internet has allowed for so many voices to sort of be there, there was equal time and respect to both sides of all those arguments, whether they had rational foundations or not. And so British citizens later on complained that nobody actually provided them with adequate information about how to vote. Most felt very overwhelmed by the mixed messages and sort of the uncertainties. And so there's also the internet and then the 24/7 now news cycle on top of that, which means that a lot of events are not actually being given a deep dive. There's not much analysis. It's not very reflective, and so it's not very useful to the voter themselves. And so he outlined something called digital political activism, which I really like. But he said that it's mainly made up of young middle class who are confident in the cultural fast lane. And these are people who tweet occasionally, but also follow Twitter trends. Now, if you've looked at the Kenya's real estate on Twitter, you can see really the war of hashtags almost every day. And, these trends are sort of become part of your identity. So what Jem was talking about, you see more of the hustler narrative or the dynasty narrative, and you just start to see more in that, and that's all you see all the time online, right? But he cautions that this is a minority, not only of the national populations, but even of the internet users within those populations. So there are very few elite people who are having this big voice just because of the internet platform. And so he says the problem is not only quantitative, that there's an overload, but there's a cultural change. People are feeling pressured more and more to sort of filter all these opinions. And so he gives us a good analogy. He said, when you vote the next time, think of it as if you're buying a house, as if you were shopping for real estate, for property. You don't buy a house quickly, just because somebody has pitched you quickly in a debate or something like that. You're very deliberate about the process. And so he asks voters to take that same time before you vote. Be very deliberate. What does this person stand for? What is the, the party or the regime or whatever? What is it going to offer you? And being very conscious, change actors in that way. And so I'll end with that. So think slow and not fast when it comes to voting. And basically hit the pause button when you see a lot of chaos happening around you. So I'll end with this. On a day where we had a winning headline from Daily Nation, a winning cartoon from The Star, the internet affects democracy. As more and more citizens express what they think and defend it in writing, that will change the way people understand public issues. It is easy to be wrong and misguided in your head. It is harder when the product of your mind can be criticized by others, which is what we do when we have platforms such as this, or we write for articles and things like that. But writing of ideas, arguments, and criticism often improves democracy. So we have to keep doing those things. Put your voice out there. Do have a lovely evening. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, but also find us on TV, on GoTV, Prime Free to Air, and Snapchat.